Today we're going to be looking at Iroiro in the color dark brown. So first thing you may notice is that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I do just want to say that is not synonymous with hair levels. I do different video clips and pictures and such throughout the video, so the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. Also, the only swatch of mine that is going to be virgin hair is the number 4 black swatch. The rest have been chemically colored, bleached, or treated in their lifetimes. 1 is pink, 2 is a cool tone gray, 3 is a natural red, 4 again is black, 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde, and then 12 is like basically a toned version of number 11. So to start, I will take the color directly from the container and I will apply it to the top of each swatch. Some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. Plus, different screens and monitors can make colors look different, so please just use my video as a reference for how this could possibly turn out for you.
Sliding doors, just wanna know you more. I hope you wanna be with somebody, spending all of the night moonwalking, and with the view she could see her building. Try to tell her I know I feel it. Keep me floating, I'm on my back. Slow me down when I'm living fast.
For the diluted section, we're going to do an 8:1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of the dye to 8 parts diluter. I do sometimes get questions about what diluter is, so the simplest way I like to word it is essentially a diluter is something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye. Usually each brand will sell their own version of a diluter, but because I do so many different colors and brands and stuff, I always just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. And that's where my camera stopped recording for some reason. Sorry about that, but I did apply it to all of the swatches. So I'm gonna let these sit for about 3 hours just so I can let the color fully absorb. I will then rinse it out, and when it's dry, I will meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. Alright, I did just want to remind everyone really quick that my swatches, again, are not virgin hair. Virgin hair tends to be less porous, which means it'll struggle to take and sometimes hold on to semi-permanent dye, especially if your hair leans on the darker end as well. So overall, I would say this is a brown that leans on the warmer end of the spectrum, like kind of in the reddish undertone. Now, I wouldn't say that it's so red that it almost looks like a natural red or anything, but compared to some brown, definitely is closer to red undertones. So 1 originally was pink. The direct dye portion definitely covered, but if you look at it compared to maybe like the platinum blonde swatch, the pink undertones definitely brought out that warmth, so I would say it looks even more kind of red. The diluted section, I would say probably don't dilute it as much as I did if you're trying to cover something like a pink. I definitely see a lot of pink coming through, but it's not mixing with the brown in a way where it looks like a pinky brown or anything. It's kind of just like, almost just looks like the color faded on top. So again, I would just not dilute it as much as I did if you're trying to cover a pink. The 2 was the gray. Overall, I would say that swatch turned out probably the most cool in undertone compared to the rest of the swatches. Now, this dye in and of itself is a warmer undertone color, so I still see a lot of warmth in the direct dye portion, but just compared to especially like the number 1, but even the blonde swatches, it just looks slightly less warm, but I wouldn't go as far to say that it's like a cool brown or anything like that. I would give similar advice for the diluted section as I did for number 1. I wouldn't say it covered fully, so I would say definitely don't dilute it as much as I did. Number 3 was the natural red. On the direct dye portion, I would say it's kind of, again, similar to number 1, where the warmth of the swatch beforehand definitely pulls out the warmth of the dye, and maybe it's just the lighting down here, but it actually almost just looks like a darker version of a natural red on top of the natural red swatch. The diluted section, on the other hand, I don't see a difference. If there is a difference, it's very minute. 4, I do not see a difference. 5 and 6, I don't see a huge difference either. I will say that the undertones look a little different. On both 5 and 6, they just look a little bit warmer than they used to be. But even between the top and the bottom, like the direct dye and the diluted section, I don't see much. So this is a dye that I would say definitely is better for lighter hair. It's not till number 7 that you can see a difference between the direct dye and the diluted section. Both 7 and 8 I would say turned out similar. Obviously the 8 swatch is a little bit lighter in undertone, so the dye turned out a little bit lighter as well. And on both 7 and 8 it does look darker, and again a little bit more warm tone than it was before in the red direction. I will say the diluted sections don't look wildly different than before. If there is a difference, it's probably just the undertone. They're probably not really much darker than they were. Now, something I'm noticing on 9, 10, 11, and 12, they all kind of took the color in different ways. So 9 ended up looking lighter on the direct dye portion than it does on 10, 11, and 12. And then 11, while it's darker than 9, it's still lighter than 10 and 12. Now, I have seen that happen before with the kind of mid-tone browns where it won't take as well. Like, it'll take better on the slightly darker and the slightly lighter, but the middle one won't take as well. My thought is that it's either the people, whoever's hair this is, the porosity is different between the swatches. And like I said before, everyone's hair will take color differently. So one person's hair might hold on better than someone else's, and that could be what's happening. My other thought is that it could be something to do with the undertones and the color of the swatches. So I have mentioned before also that cool undertones tend to reflect light less than warm undertones, like yellowy undertones especially. So sometimes something that looks golden in undertone versus something that's like ashy in undertone, even if they're technically both the same lightness, the warmer undertone thing will look brighter. So 12 being a toned swatch with a very ashy undertone could be why it turned out darker than 11, seeing as 11 had the more yellowy undertones beforehand. I'm not quite sure, but those are my theories. But once you get to 9, from 9 to 12, the diluted sections all took fairly well. Now, I wasn't originally going to dilute it as much as I did, but I just figured like it would be kind of nice to see what a very lightened version of this dye could look like. The only downside of that is some of the darker swatches don't take it as well, but I think it's still nice to see, especially on the number 11 swatch. Again, it's a warmish, almost red undertone brown. I think on number 9, the diluted section doesn't look as different, but I do remember 9 being lighter than that. So there is still definitely a difference, but it does look, quite natural, considering this is a brown that makes sense. So I have 2 comparisons that I wanted to look at today. One is a more goldeny undertone brown, and the other is going to be a more red undertone brown. So we'll start with the golden. That's going to be Overtone in the color chocolate brown. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So while the Overtone in regular house lighting looks a little bit lighter than it does right here, you can still see the range in which Overtone is definitely a lot darker, and hopefully you can see just how much more kind of yellowy this brown is in comparison to the Iro. So now the Iro in comparison to the chocolate brown, hopefully you can see the red undertones that I am talking about. And the only other difference I wanted to just mention is that the Overtone does seem to be a little bit more pigmented as well. So if you have hair that struggles to take color, the Overtone might be a little bit better, but the undertone is a lot different. So you just kind of have to take the pros and the cons. And then the other comparison I wanted to do that was a little bit more red is Manic Panic in the color Cattail. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So seeing the iroiro next to Cattail, the iroiro almost looks a little bit more orangey in undertone compared to Cattail. Now, the nice thing about the Manic Panic is they still are quite natural. Something I've noticed, and probably anyone who's ever done red hair would notice, is that the red undertones tend to fade really fast. So that's also something to keep in mind if you're going for a natural red. I don't think either of these would be a good option because any red tones that are in these will probably fade really quickly, or depending on your hair undertone, might not even take. On the number 11 swatches, they are pretty close in depth. I think the Manic Panic just looks a little less vibrant in comparison, but it's nothing wild. It's not like the iroiro is super vibrant in comparison. It's just, I see a little bit more softness in the Manic Panic. All right, so now I'd like to look at the before and after clips. Those, as well as anything past this point in the video, will all be done in natural lighting.
Sliding doors, just wanna know you more. I hope you wanna be with somebody, spending all of the night moonwalking, and with the view she could see her building. Try to tell her I know I feel it. Keep me floating, I'm on my back. Slow me down when I'm living fast.
I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so very much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.